Hello everybody. Significance testing is not state of the art. And the reason that we see it everywhere is not that it is working, which it is not, but because it provides a mirage of something that we like to see in the world. Let me explain in this short presentation. When humans observe things, for example that everything drops to the ground, we like to make a theory out of it, which says things tend to drop, let's call it gravity. There's no way to prove gravity because we don't know whether things will drop tomorrow, but there is a way to disprove gravity. Because gravity says that things flying up is impossible, so if we do see things fly up, then gravity theory is wrong and we have to replace it by something more complex. Note that in this scheme, gravity is not just some null hypothesis, but it's a theoretically backed up reasonable hypothesis. And if we don't see things dropping, that doesn't support gravity. If there's an alternative hypothesis that explains past data, it will also explain any future data that things drop. If we observe things that do not drop, then we revise our theory by saying things tend to drop unless they are lighter than air, or they have wings, or they have an upward momentum, and a lot of things are added until it's all too complex and we replace it. Things tend to drop probably, and voila, probabilistic theories are born. Since with a probabilistic theory, a single counterexample is obviously not sufficient to reject the hypothesis, we change our logical setting by saying if the theory is true and some data then is unlikely, and we still find that data, we say that H0 is unlikely. Sadly, this happens to be wrong. And even to the degree it is correct, our two things that we need a theoretically backed up reasonable hypothesis to begin with, and that likely data doesn't support the null hypothesis, is typically ignored because it's not very convenient. Let me give you a current example. So in the COVID-19 crisis, we are wondering how to get safely from A to B. Two options would be individual traffic or public transportation. And we really would like to know which of the two is safer. In fact, we want a yes-no answer. We please don't want any complex things like probabilities. So some researchers set up the null hypothesis that the risk is the same in both. They collected data and found that the data is not unlikely under the null hypothesis, and they concluded that public transportation is as safe as individual traffic. This conclusion is incorrect because, firstly, on my bike I have no probability of infecting myself, so the null hypothesis had zero probability to begin with. This hypothesis testing doesn't work in general, and in particular it doesn't work to interpret a null result. What we want instead is a distribution over the additional risk of public transportation. We love yes-no answers, but that's just not what we get in reality. To cope with the situation, we ritualize hypothesis testing and create a lot of hoops we've got to jump through. Such rules allow us to still create yes-no answers and then say, okay, what I did wasn't correct, but at least I followed the rules. Some of these rules are very important and we should follow them. However, they don't help us with the problems of null hypothesis testing. Some other rules just don't make any sense at all. But there is a solution how we can do cumulative science with probabilistic theories. Let's merge Bayes and Aristotle. If we have some a priori belief in a theory and this theory allows us to compute the probability of the data, then we can use this data to update the probability of the hypothesis. The technically difficult part is to formalize this prior knowledge. And informative priors are a very important additional feature. They are, however, not required to do Bayesian statistics. Doing Bayesian analysis without a prior, which technically is implemented by using a flat prior, makes most technical steps exactly the same as with frequentistic analysis. Therefore, it's very easy to switch without buying into the disadvantages. For example, if you're interested whether a parameter is below a threshold, marked here for example as a null hypothesis, so the blue area, then this probability is identical to the p-value if you use flat priors and have asymptotically normal likelihoods, which is an assumption we usually can make in empirical sciences. To summarize, using Bayesian statistics is easy. Computationally, you can just do what you always did. And adding informative priors later on is still possible. It avoids the black and white non-cumulative NHST mirage, and therefore significance testing is just no longer state of the art. For these reasons, in our roles as reviewers or editors, we should no longer accept papers that only use frequentistic significance testing. Thank you for your attention.